And good evening for everyone in China. So on behalf of Confucius Institute of UFMG, I'd like to welcome all of you for this session. It has been a very important series of workshops, and they will contribute a lot for the Brazilian studies together with Chinese studies and the relationship between these two countries. And we are welcoming all of you to come to Brazil in November for our 10th anniversary, especially the ones from China representing the School of Economics. So thank you very much for being with us today, and all the guests and the ones who are attending this session. And I'd like to congratulate Professor Monica for her hard work in this, let's say, committee organizing all these events. Thank you and have a good session.
Thank you, Professor Miriam Mansour. It's our pleasure, and I think that the opportunity of this partnership with Hearst University that is done through the Confucius Institute is very important for us, very important for CEDEPLA. I'm quite sure that after these workshops, we have the opportunity to start research proposals together, research projects. We found lots of similarities, and at the both centers, they have very common interests. So I'm quite sure that we will start a strong partnership. Thank you so much for supporting us and in these workshops. It was really important for CEDEPLA to have the support from a Confucius Institute in these events. So I would like to start our meeting today, our last meeting. So before we start, just thank you for the audience. We have 30 minutes for each part. So we are going to start with Professor Zhang. So you have 30 minutes. The idea is to present an overview about social inequalities in China. And after we will have Professor Anemit and Professor Mariangela. I don't know if Professor Mariangela is already with us. Are you with us, Mariangela?
Yes, I'm here, Monica.
Okay, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Mariangela, and I'd also like to thank you, Mariangela, to accepting this invitation. So we are just starting now. So Professor Zhang, that's with you, please. Thank you. Okay, Professor Zhang, I don't know, the screen is a little bit cut.
It's
okay.
Let me adjust.
Thank you.
Okay, it's Oh, can you see my screen now? Can you see my screen now?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Good morning, everyone in Brazil, and good evening, everyone in China. I am Xichen. I'm an assistant professor at Huazhong University of Science and Technology. Today, I'm honored to have this opportunity to share in the last session of our international symposium series. Thank Monica for the all the organization work. So today, our topic is social inequalities. So today I'm going to introduce the income inequality in China and the poverty elevation policies. So first, let me introduce the outline of today's presentation. Today I'm going to talk about two topics. The first one is inequality in China, which includes the evolution of Gini coefficient over time in China, and also the patterns of income inequality over time and across groups and regions in China. And after that, I will briefly discuss the sources of income inequality. And the last part, I will introduce the income inequality across generations in China. And the second part is poverty reduction policies in China. And I will spend most of the time talk about the most recent round of poverty alleviation, which is called targeted poverty alleviation. So part one is inequality in China. As we know, China has undergone a dramatic transformation since economic reforms, which initiated in 1978. After the reform, the country has moved away from a central planned economy toward a more market-oriented system. And now it has achieved some success economically, but as we will see later, the growth has not been spread equally among the citizens. So after like eliminating the absolute poverty in the country, now the relative income inequality has received more and more attention among the policymakers and researchers. So before going into any details, first I want to just summarize the trend we are going to observe. As we will observe later, the income inequality in China has rapidly increased in the first 3 decades since 1978, since the year economic reform in China initiated. But the income inequality stabilized and slightly declined in the past decade, which is consistent with the well-known Kuznets hypothesis. We know the Kuznets hypothesis states that as the economy grows, the income inequality first increases and then decreases. And in China, we have certainly we mainly lie on the first phase of Kuznets curve, but there are some signs showing that China may enter the second phase of declining income inequality. So before we see the numbers, I think it will be helpful to just to refresh our memory about how to calculate, how to measure inequality. Of course, there are many ways to measure inequality, but here I'm just going to talk about the most common way to measure inequality, which is Gini coefficient. We know Gini coefficient is a number between 0 and 1. And to calculate this number, we need to draw the Lorentz curve. First, we need to draw the perfect equality Lorentz curve. And in this graph, it can be represented by line AB. And this curve indicates that each quintal of households get 20% of the aggregate income. And we also have actual Lorentz curve, which represents the actual income inequality, actual income distribution in the country. And to calculate the Gini coefficient, we need to calculate the ratio of the shaded area to the area lying the triangle ABC. So we get a number between 0 and 1, and 0 means perfect equality, which means everyone get the same income, and 1 means perfect inequality, which means one person get all the income. Next, I'm going to talk about the data sources in China we use to calculate Gini coefficient. There are mainly two data sources. The first one is the official one. It's the annual national household income and expenditure surveys of the National Bureau of Statistics. So this data source is the official data source. It has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is this data source contain a lot of observations, so the sample size is large compared to other data sources. But it also have disadvantages. The first one is the survey has limited number of questions, so there's not so much we can analyze or to conduct research. Second one is this survey is like cross-section data. It cannot be used as a panel data. And the third one is this data source is not open to public. It's not publicly available. You can apply for it, but most of the time the data we have the statistics obtained using this data source is in aggregate form. And also the second type of data source we use in China is the periodic national household surveys, such as China Household Income Project, China Family Panel Studies, and China Household Finance Survey. Now we have so many of them, and they're here I just listed a few of them. This kind of data, this type of data has advantage and disadvantage as well. The advantage is it has rich information, has a lot of questions. And also, as you can see from the name of the data set, some of them are panel data. So there's a lot of things we can do. But also it has disadvantage. Disadvantage is the sample size is usually much more smaller than the official data source. So next, let's see the evolution of Gini coefficient in China, along with the evolution of real GDP per capita. Here we can see the horizontal axis is time from 1978 to 2016. And so 1978 is when the economic reform in China taken places. And we can see that over this period, the per capita GDP has grown significantly. Actually, the per capita GDP has been elevated around 20-fold during the past 4 decades. And within the same time period, we can see Gini coefficient has been increasing as well. From the at the beginning of the period, 1978, we can see Gini coefficient is around 0.3, but at the but it reaches its peak at 2008, and I think the number is 0.47 in 2008. So Gini coefficient has increased a lot during this past 4 decades. But we can also see that after 2008, the Gini coefficient has stabilized and even show a slight declining trend, which is the thing which is the phenomenon I have mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. That is, in China we have some evidence which is consistent with the prediction of Kuznets hypothesis. So as the economy grows, in the income inequality first increases, and then it seems it has reached a phase of we can see that maybe it's around the turning point or past the turning point, but we can still, it is still uncertain. I think we still need to see more data. Next, let's look at the urban and rural disparity in China. We can see urban and rural disparity is in this graph. It is represented by the blue line, and urban-rural disparity here is calculated by the ratio of urban of the disposable income of the urban households divided by the net household income of the rural households. So we can see that the urban-rural disparity over the period also exhibit a upward trend. But there are a few things I want to mention. The first one is I think it is very interesting to see that at the beginning period of the reform, at the earlier years of the economic reform, we can see that the urban-rural disparity actually declines. And that is because in China, the economic reform, it has been taking place first in the rural area and then the urban area. So before 1984, the urban reform has not begun. So we can see the urban-rural disparity has been declining. And after that, after the urban reform started, we can see urban-rural disparity begin to increase. And in 1984, there's a temporal drop. After that, it has been increasing, I think, with a faster rate. But after 2008, we can see that urban-rural disparity actually declines. Next, I want to talk about the urban and rural Gini coefficient. In China, we have a very sharp administrative and economic divide between urban and rural areas. So we need different survey questionnaires. So before 2013, the National Bureau of Statistics of China conducted separate urban and rural household surveys. And measures of inequality are reported for urban and the rural areas separately. And we can get a weighted national measure as we have seen in previous slide. But after 2013, it implemented the reform of a unified urban-rural household survey with the unified indices, statistic caliber, and the processing process. Next, let's see the evolution of urban and rural Gini coefficient in China from 1978 to 2010. We can see that there's actually two things I want to mention. The first one is we can see that rural Gini is consistently higher than urban Gini, and the gap between them is around 3 to 8%. And the second thing I want to mention is that we can see the trend of rural Gini and urban Gini actually very similar. So before, I think before the mid-1990s, the upward trend is actually with a steep increase. But after the mid-1990s, we can see the upward trend is with a steady increase. We can also observe the patterns over time and across groups and regions in China. So this graph shows the income gaps between East, Central, and Western China during 1978 and 2016. From this figure, we can see that First, we can see that East China, the income in East China is consistently higher than the rest regions of China. So that is actually have something to do with the national development policy, because in China during the economic reform, the government emphasizes the regional advantage, comparative advantage. So it allow or even encourage some regions to get rich faster than other regions. And this encouragement favors east part of China because the coastal area has the geographic advantage. So East China has the income in East China has been consistently higher than West or Middle China. So that is one thing I want to mention. Another thing is we can see that I think all the three lines, the income gap between East and West China, the income gap between East and Middle China, the income gap between Middle and West China has been stabilized, and even we can see some declining trend after 2008. So this is another thing I want to mention. And the reasons we will talk about it later in the second part of the presentation. So why is income inequality increases in China? There has been a lot of research on this topic, this very important topic, and the existing studies have identified various sources of income inequality. Here, because of the time constraint, I'm just going to list it, the possible, the potential sources of income inequality, and maybe discuss one of them. The first one, migrating from rural to urban areas. In China, we have this household registration system, 户口 system, which actually puts some restrictions on the migration between rural and urban areas. Although during the more recent years, this restriction has been relaxed, but it still significantly increased the migration cost of the rural residents to urban areas. It limits their like job opportunities or earning potentials. So and in recent years, more and more the restriction is more and more relaxed. So the migration from rural to urban areas has been increasing dramatically. And this migration, on one hand, it can like increase the income of the poor rural residents, but on the other hand, it can also like worsen the income disparity between rural and urban areas in China. And this regional disparity is important because it is related to opportunity inequality, which can in turn also, we can in turn just worsen the income disparity across the regions. So that is just the first source of income inequality. Because of the time constraint, I'm just going to list it here, and we will move on to next point. The next point I want to introduce is the equality across generations. When talks about inequality, I think it's very interesting or very important to see the intergenerational dimension of inequality. That is, whether the income inequality can be transmitted across generations. And this question can be answered by just estimating this simple regression equation. The dependent variable here is the income level, and T is the current period of the life course or the children's generation, and T-1 is the earlier period of the life course or the parents' generation. And beta is the intergenerational income elasticity, while Y is in log form. 1 minus beta is a measure of intergenerational income mobility. And using the equation we have just seen on this slide, those authors have plot the Great Gatsby curve in China. The Great Gatsby curve is actually a graphical representation of the relationship between Gini coefficient and the intergeneration mobility. So Great Gatsby curve basically says as the income inequality increases, the intergenerational mobility decreases. There is a negative correlation between them. And this Great Gatsby curve has been observed in many developed countries. And now we have some evidence that we can observe the Great Gatsby curve in China as well. So we can see in this graph, the horizontal axis is Gini coefficient of the parents' generation, and the vertical axis is the intergenerational elasticity of income, which can be estimated using the regression equation in the previous slide. And we can see that there is a positive relationship between them, which means as the income inequality increases, it would be harder for a person to move up the income ladder if he or she is from a poor family. So that's part one. Part two is about the policy. It's about poverty alleviation policies in China. And I will first briefly talk about the history of poverty alleviation policies in China, and then spend most of the time talk about the most recent round of the poverty alleviation policy, which is called PPA, as we'll see later. So China has a long history of poverty alleviation policies. Since the founding of the country, the government has been committed to poverty alleviation. In early years, the government implemented a series of land reform policies, which helped to reduce poverty in rural areas. And in the 1980s, the government launched a series of rural reform policies, including the household responsibility system, which allows farmers to lease land from the government and keep the profits from their crops. This policy helped to increase agriculture productivity and reduce poverty in rural areas. And also because of this policy, if you remember, the Gini coefficient or the urban-rural divide has been actually declining during the early years of the reform. And after that, actually most of the reform focuses on the urban areas. So in the 1990s, the government launched a new round of poverty alleviation policies, which focused on developing the vast region of China, where poverty was most severe. And the government invested heavily in the infrastructure, education, and healthcare in these areas, and also provided subsidies and other forms of support to poor households. The most recent round of poverty alleviation policies called targeted poverty alleviation policy. It is initiated in 2013, and it is a comprehensive policy package which aims to lift all people out of poverty by the end of 2020. This graph actually corresponds to the history we just talked about. We know that fighting poverty needs money. So this, I'm sorry. So this graph actually shows the central government's special fund for poverty alleviation during the after the economic reform during 1978 to 2018. And we can see that this number has been increasing, has experienced a steady increase, steady growth to 2005. And after that, it has experienced a surge of dramatic increase. And especially after 2000, I think 15, 14, we can see the increase has been dramatically increasing. The amount has been dramatically increasing. And that corresponds to TPA period. So that's why we're going to spend most of the time talk about that policy. So the TPA is short for targeted poverty alleviation. This policy is initiated in 2013, and the goal was to eliminate poverty and narrow the urban-rural income gap at 2020. The policy includes a policy mix that formulates approaches to industrial development, employment training, medical service with reduced medical costs, ecological protection, relocation, education improvement, and social security assistance. So the basic idea is the government try to empower the poor with enhancing their capacity instead of just increase the income level. And also the program has made a significant has had a significant impact on the rural areas. The poverty has increased the household income by 16.4 to 19.6%. By the end of 2020, all of China's impoverished counties and villages had been lifted out of poverty, and around 1 million rural people had been lifted out of poverty. I think for this policy, to understand this policy, three things are very important. The first one is this TPA strategy actually include to establish leading groups on poverty alleviation at all administrative levels. And second one is this TPA strategy include to create a nationwide registration system to monitor progress and gather data. So before the TPA strategy, I think the country calculates the poor population just by using the sample data, but during the TPA period, the government actually spent a lot of effort to establish a system to do a head count, to establish a file for each per household. And the third point is to create custom-made projects for poor households to allocate funds more accurately. And I borrowed this graph from a paper just recently published in China Economic Review. The TPA has in this figure, it shows the policy figures and policy package and poverty alleviation goals of the TPA in China. So from this graph, we can see that TPA has two features. The first one is a policy package, which means the government tried to alleviate poverty or try to lift people out of poverty through education, health promotion, relocation, employment, industrial development, finance, photovoltaic project, subsistence loans, building self-belief, and so on. So it's a whole package. And the second policy feature is individual and household specific measures. So the basic idea is to provide the poor with targeted support. And there are actually a lot of articles trying to evaluate the effectiveness of China's TPA. The cases in point include industrial development, photovoltaic projects, relocation, e-commerce business, material living standards, health status and health equity, and subjective well-being. We can see that those cases in point actually corresponds to the policy package we have just seen. In summary, most of the research found that TPA has increased the subjective and objective well-being of the poor. So to summarize, today I have actually introduced like two topics. The first one is the inequality in China, income inequality in China. And here I want to, I think two stylized facts are very important and worth repeating. The first one is in China, in data, we have observed this generally increasing trend in Gini coefficient over the last 4 decades. And this pattern holds at the household level by region or urban-rural divide. But during the past decade, we can see the inequality trend turns to be stable or even slightly declining. So that is consistent with the prediction of Kuznets' hypothesis. And the second thing is in China, we have observed this negative correlation between income inequality and the intergenerational mobility, which is consistent with the Great Gatsby curve observed in many developed countries. And in the second part, I have talked about the poverty alleviation policies in China. I spent most time talking about the most recent round called targeted poverty alleviation. So I think that's all I want to share today. Thank you very much for the attention, and thank you very much for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, I will be very happy to discuss at the end of the session.
Thank you very much, Professor Zhang, for this amazing presentation of this overview about inequalities in China. And I would like to invite Professor Ana Hermeto and Professor Mariângela Antigo to do their presentation, their talk. Thank you, Aninha and Mariângela.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, everybody. Good morning and good evening. I'll present a little bit different from this amazing presentation that was made before me, and I will present a little bit of an overview of the last decades of income inequality in Brazil, and then I will present some lines of possible dialogues with people in China, our colleagues in China, and present some results of our last papers. And let me just share the screen. Just a minute. Okay. I think I'll present like this. Just a moment. Okay, Let me just a moment, just a moment. I just have to put it in full screen. Just a moment. Yeah. No, I can't do this way. Just a moment. Okay, share. Yeah. Not okay. I'm not able to put this full screen. I don't know why. Just a moment. Okay. Screen. Okay. Okay. Let's do this way.
From the one who is do slide atual, Aninha.
Okay.
Ali do slide atual. Ali. No lado da sua tela, ali do slide atual. Aí.
Okay. Thank you. So we will address like this income distribution and multidimensional inequalities in Brazil. I'll not stress like this presentation before me, the rural-urban gradients, although they are so important in Brazil also. I'll try to make these connections as I will present the results, but yes, we have a common pattern of gradients between rural and urban areas in Brazil. And I will stress a little bit more of spatial inequalities also. That is a common feature also, and some of these macroeconomics indicators, but I'll focus on some kind of labor market inequalities in Brazil. So Brazil remains among the most unequal in the world, and I'll present some evidence. Inequality is one of the most distinctive characteristics of Latin American economies, also one of the main social and policy concerns. I will address like some of our poverty alleviation policies also, the Bolsa Família program, and patterns and trends of inequality in income and other relevant variables such earnings, education, housing, and access to basic services, as we state like these multidimensional inequalities in Brazil. In the last decades, we see this kind of improvement and deceleration. Income inequality has significantly changed over the recent decades, increasing the 90s, a strong reduction over the 2000s, and slowdown or even stagnation in the 2010s. The pandemic has also affected these inequalities. Although these changes have been remarkable in some periods, most notably in the early and mid-2000s, they seem to have been insufficient to transform the basic characteristics of Brazilian income distributions. Brazil has significantly higher income inequality than its degree of development would predict. Focusing the labor market, although there have been some improvements over the last 3 decades, the evidence suggests that changes toward lower dispersion in labor market outcomes have been slowing down in recent years. So increases in labor force participation and employment among mainly female unskilled workers have decelerated. The gap in hours worked continues growing. The reduction in wage gaps has substantially slowed, and gaps in formality rates are falling very slowly and are still at levels higher than in the early 90s. So if we think beyond income, I will not stress this because last workshop was about this, but beyond income, the widespread and rather uniform rise in years of education, the gaps have remained almost unchanged, and mainly the racial gaps in Brazil. Gaps in net enrollment rates have fallen at all educational levels, but the reduction has been less impressive in the 2010s, even at the secondary and tertiary levels, where enrollment rates are still far from 100%. And the COVID-19 pandemic has also worsened this situation. So if we can summarize these patterns, these first patterns of economic inequality in Brazil, we can say that there were improvements, they were not enough, and they have slowed. Well, let me show some evidence. First of all, the landscape Brazil worked. So we see here the top 1% national income share. This is a portrait of the current situation. So we have in Brazil much more than 20% of the population, 20% of the, 20% of the income held by the top 1% most rich in Brazil. If we go to the graphs that show this, we see this like here. The red line is the world, in Brazil is the blue line. And we see from 2000 to 2021, we see that there was an increase of this proportion held by this 1% richest persons in Brazil. It's not far from the average in the world, but if we see in the map, we can see that this is because the most populated countries are the most unequal also, not China, but India and Russia and some Mexico and some African countries. And as well, the other graphs, the other figures shows the same trend. It's not, we see that there's a persistent pattern of wealth concentration in Brazil. And if you see this last figure here, the bottom 50%, we see that Brazil is lags far from the average of the world, and this is worsening in the last decades. And this is a kind of concern for us to think that the proportion of the wealth of the income held by this 50 bottom percent is reducing over time. So I put this figure just to compare from over the century, and Brazil, comparing China and Brazil, and see this Brazil is the, let me just see here. Brazil is the yellow line, so the orange line is Brazil, is the top one national income share, but it's from the beginning of the last century. And we see this, now we are dealing with this from the 2000 here, and we see for all countries, China is here, is the red line. So we can see the upward trend of this top 1% share of the national income. So it's the patterns I would like to compare here. Here's the other side of the coin, is the bottom 50% national income share. So also we see the Brazil amongst the worst situation, and okay, and then comparing countries also for a longer period, and we see this concerning trend that I was mentioning before. And here for China, for Brazil, just a little bit of, for Brazil, we see this kind of persistent, not really an ascending trend, but stable trend of this participation. Just showing Brazil the Gini coefficient, and thank you for presenting all the dynamic of calculation of computation of this coefficient. And here we have the numbers for 2021, and Brazil also among the worst data, the worst Gini coefficient in the world. And we see like when we see these colors, we see the African countries and the South America countries concentrated in the worst situation, and then other countries here. So this is always a figure that we have to show, because okay, this is the Gini coefficient. Sorry that is in Portuguese, but just to show and compare to the figures showed before. The per capita income, the first panel is the per capita income from 2000 in the last decade, that it showed like a little bit of increasing, but the series stops before the pandemic. So we have this increasing per capita income, but and also the increasing Gini coefficient. So again, an increasing average income coming together with an increasing inequality, or an structural inequality. Here, the Gini coefficient, I'll not stay longer in this figure, just the persistence, world and Brazil. And again, here is the rate, the top 10, another measure of inequality. And we see a little bit of reducing trend for the world, but a persistence again for Brazil, that is the blue line. Okay, just some evidences, all of these showing this remarkable persistence of trends in Brazil of income inequality. Regarding the extreme poverty, we see this downward trend in Brazil. Almost since 1981, so for the last 3 decades and 4 decades, and the pandemic that showed this poverty rate just worsening, and then we see a little bit of worse situation here. So we have these Brazil, and here is Latin American and the Caribbean. So we have a sustainable trend of decreasing poverty rates, and then now again an upward trend after the pandemic. Here, these maps, we just intend to show the special inequalities in Brazil. So we see the north and northeast of Brazil with this less worse average income. And then this is just comparing when we see the data coming from the National Household Sample Surveys. There is this left panel, left map, and the right map is the data that come from the tax income, the tax income data. So we see a little bit difference, more remarkable, the spatial, the regional inequality when we look of these national tax income data, and it is important to strengthen these, because the top incomes are just, we can only see this extreme inequality between the top incomes and the rest of the distribution, looking at this data from the tax income information. And here I'll just mention that we have this tax income data, we have national household sample surveys, and we have the demographic census. We have in some administrative data beyond the tax income data, that is some single registry and some labor market, formal labor market data also, to see these, just to mention some data sources that we have. But here we are just trying to compare the picture of the regional inequality in Brazil like this, looking at these two data sources. When you look at the municipalities, just to show also this huge regional inequality, income inequality, also looking from both database. Let me just show more evidences. So here we have the poor population, and just looking at the amount, the population that is from 2000, the last decade. So we have some international poverty lines that we have to strengthen here. So when you look at the international poverty line, this is the upper line, the upper group here. But when we go to the extreme poverty, this is the green part of this figure, just to show when we have the composition of the poverty, or the intensity of the poverty in Brazil. So we have a lot of people near the poverty line and above the poverty, the national poverty line, but below the international poverty line. So just showing this composition, it's extremely important for our policies, mainly our social assistance policies in Brazil. Let me just show some more here. Here we have also, again, just comparing over time, the same information. I'll just skip these, the proportion of poor and the pandemic impact. We can see here a little bit. So here we have over time also the poverty indicators. I'll not spend time with these maps, but just to show these again, Gini coefficient and tail per capita, comparing trends over time, the recent increase of these inequality, as I had mentioned, again using another indicators of inequality. I'll just show here, and sorry, this is in Portuguese because this graph is so interesting, but I will translate for you. We have here in the 2005 the beneficiaries of our largest program for poverty alleviation. It is the Bolsa Família program that that includes like 55 million people currently in Brazil, in 11 million households. So it's a huge poverty alleviation program. And it started in the beginning of the 2000s, and we have this conditional cash transfer characteristic of this program, and that says that people, the children between 7 and 16 years had to stay in school, that have to attend school. And we have these beneficiaries in the beginning of the program, so in 2005. And now, 14 years later, they are not in the program. So this is a very good notice that we have, that they have left this program. So they have achieved the conditions to not have to be in the program 14 years later. So we have this exit condition here. Just a moment. So the structure of inequalities, I'm just looking at my time, sorry. So here I'll just focus on some characteristics of inequalities in the labor market in Brazil, just looking of these, who you are, what you do, and where you are. So the reconsideration of this persistence of inequalities. And I will stress the relevance of the intersectional inequalities in Brazil, trying to understand these layers of inequality. I just mentioned some data sources, and I'll not stay longer here. I like just to mention our context of demographic changes, so aging, rising diversity of family arrangements, rising female participation in the labor force, and rising educational levels. But we have here just an important point of this generational divide and racial divide in changing patterns of special inequalities. I'll skip this because I want to come again the Gini coefficient, but just putting beside the regional inequality for this Gini coefficient among within the regions. I had before showed some regional inequalities between regions. Here I'm showing within regions. So we see these patterns of inequalities, the important role of regional inequalities in Brazil. Here just showing the educational levels between cohorts in Brazil. So we have white men, non-white women, and white women. So we have this great trend of increasing levels of shares of people with tertiary education in Brazil, but mostly concentrated in the white groups, the white men and white women. So the mobility among the educational mobility in Brazil is clear, but also a factor that leads to the persistence of inequalities in Brazil. Just showing this again. So before I showed the educational levels, now I'm showing the income, the wage income, wage earnings in Brazil, but wage earnings for these people with tertiary education, and we see the opposite trend. So we see the decreasing levels among generations. So when you talk about mobility, income, like here I'm saying about wage mobilities in Brazil, we can see that for white men, the trend is worsening. For the other groups is like that remarkable persistence of not a mobility, not a wage mobility. So persistence and immobility in this way. So here we see for people with tertiary education, here people with not just secondary education. And again, we see a little bit less remarkable trend of decreasing for white men, but again, the persistence of these average wages. So the conclusion from this graph is that the mobility, the wage mobility in Brazil is not happening. We cannot see these. Here's just the coefficients from a wage equation for the tertiary education in Brazil. And we see over time the decreasing return or wage premium to tertiary education in Brazil, and also different, and the gradients among racial and gender groups remains. Summary of the topics, and I had much more to show, but I don't have time, but I'll just stress some points here. So the multidimensional inequality, disparities in various aspects of life, including income, wages, education, health, and more, and the interconnectedness of this dimension. The extreme inequality in Brazil, so the top income earners are increasing also, is a group that is increasing in Brazil. The causes of income inequality are historical, economic, and policy-related factors. Labor market inequalities and changes in Brazil, so we have a lot of barriers. We still have a lot of barriers in Brazilian labor market, such as informal employment, wage gaps, and lack of access to quality jobs. Education and skill disparities impact on these labor market outcomes, gender and racial disparities in the labor market, and time use, wage gaps, representation and leadership, and access to opportunities. So I'm saying here about some sources of income inequality, or trying to disentangle these sources of the persistence of income inequality in Brazil. Public policies addressing inequalities in education, health, social assistance, and security, and in labor, affirmative action and minimum wage. I just like to mention here that Mariangela and me, we work much more in labor market inequalities. So that's why I'm just stressing this here. So the current debate that I'd like to mention is how the COVID pandemic has exacerbated, trying to make some connections for our dialogue here. So how the COVID pandemic has exacerbated or ameliorated these multidimensional inequalities, investigating the effects of these disparities and economic shocks, on vulnerable populations, policy effectiveness such as Bolsa Familia and other social assistance programs in addressing these multidimensional inequalities and their impact on poverty reduction, education and its role in perpetuating or reducing inequalities, so access to quality schools, teacher training, and the digital divide. Environmental inequalities, particularly in the context of deforestation and land rights. Urban-rural disparities, including access to essential services, healthcare, and economic opportunities. As I just mentioned, intersections of gender and race and income distribution and multidimensional inequalities in the labor market dynamics, including here this gig economy jobs, the changing nature of work and the informal employment in Brazil. Our recent works deal mostly with these aspects of income inequality in Brazil, the labor market dynamics, besides the intersectional analysis and the regional analysis for Brazil. So some potential research topics, the role of technology, how technological advancements, particularly in digital access, are shaping these labor market opportunity and outcomes. As I just mentioned, the differential impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on various segments of the population. as I say, a political economy of inequalities and economic structures that perpetuate or challenge these multidimensional inequalities. The policy design that focuses intersectionality and thinking about labor income, intra and within and between group inequalities, polarization and top incomes, cumulative disadvantages over the life cycle. So among, within and between generations. The economic cycles posing again the question of if whether the rising tide lifts all boats. Poverty linking to working poor and families, as I said, between and within international mobility, and the connection of all these with the sustainment development goals. I think this is a point of contact that we have to make. Well, that's it. I just put some points here, and I thank you all for the opportunity to discuss, and I am available for questions and suggestions and points of connections between our works. Thank you, Monica. That's it.
Thank you so much, Ania, for this wonderful overview of the main topics in inequalities in Brazil. It's lots of things about this very complex picture in Brazil, but we still have some similarities with China. I'd like to open to the opportunity to Mariangela to talk if you want to add some points, Mariangela, about our case, about Brazilian case, or if you want to start the questions. Now we have some time for discussion, and so we open for discussion. So Mariangela, please.
Oh, no, I think it's open to the questions, Monica.
Do you, okay, so Professor Chen, do you want to start with questions to Professor Anermeto and Mariangela?
Oh, yes, I can start. Hi, Professor Meto. Thank you very much for the very comprehensive, very informative, and insightful presentation. And thank you for list a lot of potential research topics. I'm very interested. And I have a question. I have several questions, actually. The first one is about the labor market, labor force participation rate of the of women, female labor force participation rate in Brazil. You have mentioned that in Brazil, the female labor force participation rate has been increasing, right?
Yeah,
can you
the
hear
labor
me?
force participation, the female
yeah, has
labor
been
force
increasing.
participation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually very interested in that phenomenon, because in China we have the opposite pattern. Because my research area is labor force participation, labor supply of the of women, and we have observed a declining labor force participation rate for both male and female in China, and
But in the last decade, yeah?
I think past 3 decades. Since the mid-1990s. After that, we have observed this decline in labor force participation rate for both male and female. But for the female group, the decline has been much faster. Yeah. So I think that's a very interesting phenomenon opposite to the pattern we have observed in Brazil. But we also have a lot of things in common. But my question is, what do you think this increase in female labor force participation rate contribute to the income inequality in Brazil?
What is seen in Brazil, to be more precise, is that in the last few years we see the deceleration of the increase of labor market participation of women, and we see most remarkably the changing patterns of female labor force participation. So we have women with fewer children, so we have this much more women at this prime age at the labor market, and women are more among the elderly. We have also much more women among participating at the labor force. The opposite trend we see for the youth, that we see like a postponing of these entrance in the labor market. So we have these changing patterns of female labor market participation in Brazil. And we can say that in the last years, the last few years, we can talk about a stalled, like something that this trend has been decelerating also. So when we talk about how this contributes to the income, we see that the wage gaps have been decreasing also, but they also have been stalled, and we have worse job quality for women in Brazil, especially Black women and non-white women as a whole. But the job quality, so we can see this phenomenon of the mismatch between education, because women in Brazil are much more educated, but the allocation to occupations are still worse, and the gaps, the wage gaps that comes from this. In the beginning, the first decade of this century, we see a growing, how can I say, that the poorer women had made the largest progress, but also this is not true anymore. So yeah, this could contribute, as we say, like a gender bonus or a gender dividend, but we cannot see these. I don't know if I answer all the questions, but good to know that you work with these, because that is our main focus of our research here.
Thank you.
Yeah. My focus, my research interests are female labor force participation rate, and I have done some work on the transformation of social norms, the impact of transformation of social norms on the female labor participation decision. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a lot of work here about family roles also. So the reproductive roles of women and family, the global family change, and the labor supply of women in this context of the family changes in Brazil.
Great. Aninha?
Yeah, I also have another question.
Okay.
Professor Hermeto, about the informal sector. I think that is a very intriguing research topic as well, because I think both in China and Brazil, we can there's especially after the pandemic, I think the gig jobs, the gig economy has been growing substantially. And how do you think that will contribute to the income inequality?
Yeah, that is another focus of our research here. Yeah, we are trying to capture this using the micro entrepreneurship in Brazil. So we see that is the kind of precarious micro entrepreneurship in Brazil, when we put the establishments, the firms, and the firm size in the center of our hypothesis of this sustained inequality between in the labor market, but between economic sectors and between occupations and these informal sectors. So looking at the self-employed people and this kind of formal self-employed, but is a precarious self-employment. And yeah, that's it. And we are trying to look at these also, and we think this is a neglected aspect that in this consideration of the income inequality as a whole.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting topic. Currently I'm thinking about do something about that too, to see like I want to approach this topic from the perspective of like some human capital factors, to see how those like some non-cognitive skill can affect one's like participation into the informal economy or gig economy. Yeah. Thank you for your answers. That's
okay.
yeah,
Thank you
really
for the
answered my
questions.
questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anna, do you want to do you have any questions for Professor Shane? You are muted.
I was so interested in the poverty reduction packages. I was thinking of these, so interesting to think about these and connecting these with the intergenerational mobility. If you can speak a little bit about this, like I showed for Brazil, this is a very interesting result that we have here, because we are always said that the Bolsa Família program, our conditional cash transfer program, had a long-term impact, not a short-term impact. And now we can see this, and it's very interesting. And it means much for the between generational inequality. So I just want to listen a little bit more about this.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, thank you for the question. This is a very important question. I think the poverty package in the recent targeted poverty alleviation strategy in China includes a very important aspect, which is education. I think education plays a very important role in like lowering the just improve the intergenerational mobility, right? Because in China we have this rural urban disparity. In rural areas, the education resources are not that the standard is not that is not as high as the urban areas, so that could really limit the opportunities for the rural residents and their children. And also, we know for poor families, they do not have so many resources to invest on their children. So those two reasons, I think, are very important. And because of that, the poverty package, the targeted package, has this specific tool to increase the opportunities for the children from the poor rural households. For instance, I think they have this project which increases the quota for the poor rural households, the children from or the students from the poor rural areas, to go to the national key universities. So during the TPA period, after this targeted poverty alleviation policy, after that, the number of students who from the poverty-stricken areas go to the enrolled in national key universities increased a lot. I think that can really help to increase to the intergenerational mobility in China, because in China we have increasing returns to education, and if this students can get the education they deserve, they can have a better opportunity to move up to the income ladder in China. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I think that we have a big picture and lots of similarities, and it's quite interesting because I didn't know about the inequalities in China, and it's amazing because we saw the economy growing very fast, and also inequalities also growing at the same time. They do not have the high level as Brazil, but in relative terms, the growth does not compensate, and we also have inequalities. And also, I think that Professor Shisheng was one of the things that was very clear in all workshops was about the disparities between urban and rural in China. It was very marked in terms of education, in terms of health, and so it's quite interesting. Even about family composition, we had some disparities, and it's a little bit different in Brazil because we do not have it so marked now. I don't know, Aninha can complement a little bit. I think that in China it seems that it's a little bit great, but and we are, I think that Brazil is we are in our debate about inequalities nowadays. We have lots of things that lots of mechanisms that are being investigated. So gender, race, and so mechanisms that are very important for us now in terms of inequalities. This is quite interesting. So I think that I don't know if anyone in the audience wants to make any question, if Mariangela wants to add some points. We had many things. It was a great pleasure to have all you here. Kenya, do you want to add any point, please?
No, actually, I think that I have the same, I don't know how to say this, but this inequality in the urban and rural area in China, and then even when you have this migration flow from rural to urban areas, the inequalities within rural become high. It's still higher than the urban areas. So I'd like to know a little bit more if there are some policies that regulate this flow, but from rural to urban areas, and if there's some policies that accommodate that people from rural areas in the urban areas when they migrate to there.
Yes, thank you for your question, Kenya. Yeah, I think nowadays China has become more and more aware of this problem. They try to before I think so the first I think the restrictions on the rural to urban migration has been relaxed during like since the mid 1990s. Before that, it is like strictly enforced, but after that, rural people can go to the urban areas to find a job. But most of the time, because of their hukou status, they are still cannot find very find jobs in formal sector. Their job most of the time they find jobs in like the low skilled sector. Yeah, some informal jobs. So this the restriction on the rural to urban migration greatly increases the migration cost and limit their earning potential. But also this is one aspect. The other one is their children. When they migrate from rural area to urban areas, their children cannot in the earlier days they cannot the public schools in the urban areas, they cannot have access to those schools. They cannot enroll in those public schools in the city area. So that is another very, I think that is a constraint for them. So there's a lot of children left behind in rural areas. And that is also, I think, is not very good for the children to apart from their parents. But during the more recent years, China has spent more and more effort to change the situation. China want to I think the goal is to give the rural residents the equal access to the resources in the urban areas. But we are still on our way. So that is a long process, but I think, especially I think during the recent years, China has emphasized this a plan to change the situation. I think that is my answer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Shen. And I would like to congratulate all the presentation, Anita, Mariana, and Shen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Monica, may I just add just a remark about this question about urban hero gradients.
Yes.
Just to mention that in Brazil, as we have already talked in the last workshops, the bounds, the limits between urban and rural are much more fluid, like fuzzy, and we have these medium cities that occupies an intermediate position between rural and urban for the municipalities and for people in these places. So we have in the rural, like that is conceptualized as rural areas, a question of an age composition that is so selective. So we have this much older people in the rural areas in Brazil. And I think this is important to mention that the inequalities in the urban areas, especially at the metropolitan areas, has this kind of huge within inequality. That's because of the fringe and of the periphery of these metropolitan areas. So we have a much complex, I think you have to, but in China, but in Brazil, the question is so we have to think about also gradients of rural and urban characteristics to understand this determination of inequalities. That's just this. Thank you very much. This is a important, very important contrast that we have to make. Okay.
So I'd like to thank the three professors for the wonderful, amazing presentations today, and also the audience. I see lots of people today. We have a great audience from Brazil and for China also. And I think that these workshops were the first step to collaboration between HUST and UFMG. We have in our center, CEDEPLAR, where we have lots of things in common. I think that the research topics are very similar. People are working very close at the approach, spatial, the regional things, regional aspects, this inequalities, environmental, demographics. It's amazing how both graduate programs are so close in terms of the research topics. So we are really happy with this possibility, opportunity. I would like to thank Professor Jessica Sun, who helped me a lot to organize this workshop in the Chinese side. Jessie, are you here with us? Do you want to open your camera just to say hello for people?
Oh, sure. Hi, Monica. Thanks a lot.
So thank you very much, Jessie, for being with us and for helping us at the host side. You were our host side, and Professor Jinshi as well. I would like to tell to everybody that the Chinese will be here with us in November, and we are looking forward to receiving them here. Aninha and Mariangela, please, I think that we can organize these meetings with them, and it will be a very good opportunity.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
I see also here with us Professor John Tonucci, and so lots of people from CEDEPLA are here now. So thank you, everybody. Professor João, do you want to say something?
Hi, Monica, Ayana, Jen. Thanks very much. I don't know if you can hear me very well. My internet is not great, but it was an amazing workshop and opportunity. And I hope when the group is here in CEDEPLA, we have more chance to talk together, especially on those questions of urban and regional inequalities, which is so important across our both Brazilian and Chinese economy and geographies. So thanks very much for putting this together.
Yes, thank you, João. I think that this is a point that really we completely have to discuss a little bit more, and I think that it's a topic that is very important for you and for CEDEPLA. So thank you for coming today and being with us. Also, Professor Irineu Rigotti, who was here with us last week. Irineu, do you want to talk a little bit?
Hi, everybody. I would like just to say thank you for the presentation, magnificent presentation, to say thank you for the Brazilian and Chinese research, and I hope to see you here in November, as said Monica, and it would be a pleasure to share our ideas with you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. I'd like just to ask Professor Bernardo Campolina to close our section, and it was amazing for us to have the opportunity to organize this workshop. Professor Bernardo Campolina.
Hello, do you hear me? Yes, I think so. I think we're closing a series of workshops that have been great. We've talked and we had an opportunity to exchange experience between China and Brazil. And we look forward to receiving the Chinese delegation here in Brazil in upcoming November. So it will be very important for us to strengthen this collaboration and future joint research agendas and collaboration. It was very good to have all of you here during this past few weeks, and I hope to see you in person in upcoming November. Thank you very much. Thank you for those presentation here, Professor Shane, Professor Ana Hermeto, and Mariangela. And thank you, Monica, for such a huge effort that you've been doing to putting this together in the last few months.
Thank you, Bernardo. And so we are finishing our section today with a gold key. Thank you, everybody. I'm very happy. And thank you for the audience. We are very happy that we have such a huge audience today to close our workshop series. Okay, I hope we can meet together sooner. Thank you, bye. Thank you, everybody. The links will be available sooner at CEDEPLAR website, and people who fill the form will receive the certificate by email. Thank you, everybody. Jesse, we keep in touch and by email, and everybody. Thank you, Professor Chen, again.
Thank you.
Great. Hello.
Thank you.
Hi.